Lee opened his eyes slowly. His head felt like someone had hit it with a hammer. The last thing he remembered was the flash of blue light that had knocked him unconscious during the mission on Valdris Prime. Now he was lying on a cold metal table, in a room he did not recognize. The walls around him were made of some kind of smooth white material that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange symbols moved across the surfaces like living things. The air smelled different here, clean but with a sharp taste that made his nose burn slightly. He tried to sit up but found that his arms and legs would not move. Thin bands of energy held him down to the table. When he struggled against them, they got tighter and sent small shocks through his body. "The primitive creature is awake," said a voice that sounded like wind chimes mixed with breaking glass. Lee turned his head toward the sound. 3 tall figures stood near the wall watching him. They looked like they were made of living crystal, their bodies catching and bending the light in strange ways. Each one was at least 8 feet tall with long, thin limbs and faces that had too many angles. The one in the middle stepped closer. Its eyes were like blue diamonds that seemed to look right through him. "I am Thexmore, Chief Bio-Researcher of the Valdri Empire. You are now our test subject, human." "Where are my teammates?" Lee asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Thexmore made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your fellow primitives were less fortunate. They resisted capture and were terminated. You were the only one deemed worth studying." Lee felt a cold anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Commander Kang had trained all of them for situations like this. Stay alive, gather information, look for chances to escape. "Why am I here?" he asked. "To satisfy our curiosity," another Valdri said, moving closer to the table. This one had more. Complex crystal formations growing from its shoulders and head. "We have conquered 47 star systems, absorbed 23 different species into our empire. Yet humans continue to resist us with technology we consider outdated and genetics we view as inferior." Thexmore touched a panel on the wall, and the table Lee was on began to change. Parts of it moved and shifted, bringing new instruments down from the ceiling. "We will study your biological structure to understand why your species persists, despite its obvious evolutionary failures." "Evolutionary failures?" Lee said. "Look at yourself," the third Valdri said, its voice carrying what sounded like disgust. "Carbon-based biology, single-strand DNA, limited neural processing, no quantum field interface capability. Your entire species should have died out millions of years ago." Thexmore began running some kind of scanner over Lee's body. The device made soft humming sounds as it moved from his head to his feet. "Your cellular structure is chaotic and inefficient. Your genetic code contains massive amounts of what you call junk DNA that serves no apparent purpose. Yet somehow, you managed to develop space travel and energy weapons. Perhaps they steal technology from more advanced species," suggested the second Valdri. "No," Thexmore said, studying readings on a floating display. "These scans show clear signs of technological development over time. They actually invented these things themselves, despite their primitive biology." Lee watched the aliens discuss him like he was not even there. He had heard about the Valdri from intelligence reports, but seeing them in person was different. They moved with perfect coordination, their crystal bodies reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Everything about them seemed designed for efficiency and perfection. The door to the room opened with a soft whisper and another figure entered. This one was clearly human, a woman in her 40s with short black hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple gray uniform that looked like it had seen better days. "Dr. Park," Thexmore said without looking away from its instruments, "you will assist in the biological analysis of this specimen." Dr. Park walked over to Lee's table but did not meet his eyes at first. When she finally looked at him, he saw something in her expression that might have been an apology. "Hello," she said quietly. "I'm Dr. Park. I was a xenobiologist before they captured my research team 6 months ago." "6 months?" Lee said. "How many humans do they have here?" "Just me now," Dr. Park replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The others were used in earlier experiments." Thexmore made that glass chime sound again. "Dr. Park has been very helpful in explaining human biology to us. though she continues to make ridiculous claims about your species' potential." "What kind of claims?" Lee asked. Dr. Park glanced nervously at the Valdry before answering. "I tried to explain that human genetics are more adaptive than they appear, that our so-called junk DNA might serve purposes they don't understand." "Nonsense," the second Valdry said. "We have studied genetics for over 10,000 years. Our own DNA has been perfected through careful engineering and quantum enhancement. Human genetics are simply inferior." Thexmore activated another device, and Lee felt a strange tingling sensation all over his body. "We will begin with basic cellular analysis," it announced. "Then we will test pain responses, healing rates, and psychological breaking points." "This is against the Geneva Convention," Lee said. All three Valdry made the chiming sound together. "Your primitive treaties have no meaning here, human. You are property of the Valdry Empire now, to be used as we see fit." Dr. Park moved closer to Lee's table and pretended to adjust one of the instruments. As she did, she whispered so quietly he almost missed it. "Stay strong. Things are not always what they seem." Before Lee could ask what she meant, Thexmore began. "The first test." Pain shot through Lee's nervous system as the alien device probed his cellular structure. He gritted his teeth and tried not to scream. The Valdry watched with scientific interest as their instruments mapped every part of his biology. They talked about him like he was a puzzle they needed to solve, discussing his primitive evolution and inferior design. But Dr. Park watched with different eyes. She had spent months studying both human and Valdry biology, and she had begun to suspect something the aliens had missed in their arrogance. Human DNA was not inferior. It was something far more dangerous. It was unpredictable. 3 days after his capture, Lee was dragged from his cell by 2 Valdry guards. Their crystal hands felt like ice against his skin as they pulled him through long corridors filled with that same strange glowing light. "Where are you taking me?" he asked, but the guards did not answer. They never spoke to him directly, treating him like a piece of equipment being moved from one place to another. The corridors opened into a massive space that took Lee's breath away. He stood at the edge of an enormous arena that stretched out for what looked like miles in every direction. The walls rose up so high he could barely see the top, and floating platforms filled with Valdry spectators dotted the air above. At the center of it all, suspended on a throne made of living crystal that pulsed with its own light, sat the largest Valdry Lee had ever seen. This one wore robes that seemed to be cut from starlight itself, and its crystal body was so complex it hurt to look at directly. "Behold the God King Zurthak," one of the guards said with something like worship in its voice. "Ruler of the Valdry Empire for 1,000 years. The arena floor was covered in sand that sparkled like ground diamonds. Strange plants grew in patches around the edges, their leaves moving even though there was no wind. Lee could see dark stains in the sand that he did not want to think about too closely. "Human," a voice boomed from speakers built into the walls. It was Zurthak speaking, his words carrying across the entire arena. "You will fight for our entertainment. If you survive, you will live another day. If you fail, you will feed the sands." Thousands of Valdry in the floating seats made that chiming sound together, creating a noise like a crystal cathedral being torn apart. They were excited to see blood. A gate opened on the far side of the arena, and something came out that made Lee's stomach turn. It looked like a giant spider, but its legs were made of metal and its body pulsed with the same blue energy the Valdry used in their weapons. 8 eyes focused on Lee with hungry intelligence. "The slicer has killed 43 opponents," Zurthak announced. "It was designed specifically to hunt carbon-based life forms. Show us how your primitive evolution fares against Valdry bioengineering." Lee had no weapons except his bare hands and whatever combat training Commander Kang had drilled into him during their years together. The spider thing moved toward him with mechanical precision, its metal legs clicking against the arena floor. He dove to the side just as razor-sharp appendages sliced through the air where his head had been. The creature was fast, but Lee noticed it moved in predictable patterns, like a machine following programmed instructions. For 20 minutes, Lee dodged and rolled, staying just ahead of the creature's attacks. The Valdry audience grew bored. their chiming sounds becoming more irritated. They wanted to see him torn apart, not watch him run around the arena. Finally, Lee saw his chance. The slicer overextended itself during one attack, and Lee grabbed onto one of its metal legs. Using his body weight, he swung around and managed to tear loose some of the wiring that connected its legs to its body. The creature stumbled, sparks flying from its damaged systems. Lee grabbed a handful of the sparkling sand and threw it into the thing's clustered eyes, then jumped onto its back and began pulling apart more of its internal mechanisms. When the slicer finally stopped moving, the arena fell silent. Lee stood on top of the dead bioweapon, breathing hard and covered in its blue mechanical blood. The silence stretched on for several seconds before Zorthak spoke again. Interesting. The primitive survived through crude tactics rather than superior biology. Lee was taken back to a holding area beneath the arena, where he found another human waiting for him. She was a woman about his age with short hair and scars on her arms that told stories of hard fighting. "I'm Kim," she said, offering him a cup of water. "Former Special Forces. I've been fighting in this arena for 2 weeks now." "How are you? Still alive?" Lee asked, drinking the water gratefully. "Same way you just survived," Kim replied. "By being unpredictable. The Valdry engineer their creatures to counter specific types of opponents. But they always assume those opponents will behave logically." Kim showed Lee around the small holding area. There were sleeping spaces for maybe 20 people, but only 5 were occupied. The others were humans from different captured ships and research teams. "The Valdry don't understand us," Kim explained. "They think because our biology is simpler, our minds must be simpler too. They design their arena creatures to counter strength, speed, specific fighting techniques, but they never account for creativity or desperation." Over the next few days, Lee fought 3 more times. Each creature was deadlier than the last, but each time he found ways to survive that the Valdry had not expected. He used the arena environment against a fire-breathing lizard thing, turned a metal-eating worm against itself, and confused a telepathic hunter by thinking about random memories instead of his battle plans. Dr. Park appeared after his 4th victory, carrying medical equipment to treat his wounds. As she worked, she whispered urgent words. "Your cellular activity is increasing," she said quietly. "After each fight, your body is recovering faster than it should. The Valdry researchers have noticed too." "What does that mean?" Lee asked. "I'm not sure yet," Dr. Park admitted. "But human biology might be more adaptive than any of us realized. The stress of these fights seems to be triggering something in your genetic structure." High above in his crystal throne, Zorthak watched recordings of Lee's battles with growing interest. Beside him, High Priest Velnok studied bio-readings that showed impossible results. "The human's neural activity is expanding," Velnok reported. "His cellular regeneration has increased by 30% since his first fight. This should not be possible with primitive genetics." Zorthak's crystal eyes glowed brighter. "Perhaps this human is more interesting than we first believed. Prepare the next test, something that will push his biology to its absolute limits." The holding area below, Lee felt strange new energy flowing through his body. He was healing faster, thinking more clearly, moving with better coordination. Something was changing inside him, and he had the feeling it was just the beginning. Lee's 5th day in the arena began differently. Instead of being brought out to fight immediately, he was taken to a new area beneath the fighting grounds. This room was filled with Valdry scientists and their equipment, all focused on monitoring, something Lee could not see. Dr. Park was there too, but she looked worried in a way that made Lee's stomach tighten. When she saw him, she quickly looked away. "Today you face the Mind Render," Thexmore announced, its crystal voice echoing in the small space. "This creature attacks the mind directly, tearing apart consciousness itself. No opponent has ever survived longer than 3 minutes." "Why this one?" Lee asked. "Because your previous victories have raised questions about human neural capacity," Thexmore replied. "The Mind Render will show us the true limits of your primitive brain." Lee was pushed toward the arena entrance, but Dr. Park managed to get close enough to whisper to him. Your brain activity has been changing, she said urgently. Growing new connections faster than should be possible. Whatever happens in there, don't fight it, let it happen. Before Lee could ask what she meant, the gates opened and he was shoved onto the arena floor. The crowd of Valdry spectators was larger today, their crystal bodies creating a rainbow of light that danced across the arena walls. Zurthak sat forward, on his throne, clearly interested in what was about to happen. The creature that emerged from the opposite gate was unlike anything Lee had faced before. It looked almost human at first glance, but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, with skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Its eyes were empty black holes that seemed to pull at his vision. The mind render did not run or charge. It simply stood in the center of the arena and looked at Lee. Then the attack began. Pain exploded inside Lee's head, but not physical pain. This was something deeper, like having his thoughts torn apart and examined piece by piece. He fell to his knees, clutching his skull as the creature invaded his mind. He saw his childhood memories being pulled apart like pages from a book. His training with Commander Kang, his first mission in space, the faces of his dead teammates. All of it was being shredded by invisible claws that dug through his consciousness. Fascinating. Zurthak's voice boomed across the arena. The human's neural patterns are fragmenting exactly as predicted. But something was wrong. Instead of breaking down completely, Lee felt his mind fighting back in ways he had never experienced before. New thoughts were forming, new connections sparking to life faster than the mind render could destroy them. The creature seemed confused. It pressed harder, sending waves of mental energy that should have turned Lee's brain into soup. Instead, Lee felt something awakening inside his skull, like a sleeping giant opening its eyes. Impossible. Thexmore's voice came through the arena speakers. His neural activity is increasing, not decreasing. The human brain is adapting to the psychic attack in real time. Lee stood up slowly, the pain in his head changing from agony to something like pressure. He could feel his brain physically changing, growing new pathways and connections to defend against the mind render's assault. The creature stepped back, its empty eyes showing something that might have been fear. It had never encountered a mind that could adapt to its attacks. Lee walked toward the mind render, and with each step he felt his consciousness expanding. He could suddenly sense things he had never felt before. The emotions of the Valdry in the crowd, the electronic signals from their equipment, even the quantum fluctuations in the arena's energy barriers. What is happening? Velnok's voice crackled through the speakers. His DNA is rewriting itself, cellular structure changing at the molecular level. The mind render made a sound like screaming wind and launched its strongest attack yet. Lee felt it hit his mind like a tsunami of pure mental force, but instead of destroying him, the attack was absorbed, processed, and turned into something new. Lee reached out with his hand and touched the creature's face. The moment they made contact, the mind render froze, its body going rigid as Lee turned, its own psychic abilities back on itself. "You made one mistake," Lee said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent arena. "You assumed human minds work like yours, but we don't think in straight lines. We're chaos, and chaos adapts." The mind render collapsed, its form dissolving into mist that faded away in the arena lights. The silence that followed was complete. Thousands of Valdry stared down at Lee with something they had never felt before about a human: fear. In the monitoring room, Dr. Park watched her instruments with amazement and terror. Lee's cellular activity was off every chart they had. His DNA was not just changing, it was improving, taking the best parts of what it encountered and making them better. "Shut down the experiments," Zurthak commanded, his crystal voice carrying a note of concern for the first time in centuries. "Terminate the human immediately." But Velnok was transfixed by the readings flowing across his screens. "No, my lord. This is the discovery of the millennium. We must understand how this is possible." "I know how," Dr. Park said quietly, but her words were picked up by the room's audio systems. "Human DNA contains massive amounts of genetic potential that appears to be dormant, but it's not junk genetic code like we thought. It's adaptation, Protocols waiting for the right trigger. Thexmore turned to her, its crystal eyes blazing. Explain. Humans evolved on a world where survival meant constant adaptation to changing conditions, Dr. Park said, her voice growing stronger. Our genetics aren't designed for perfection like yours. They're designed for change, for becoming whatever we need to become. On the arena floor, Lee stood quietly, feeling the new capabilities settling into his mind and body. He could sense the fear in the Valdry observers, could feel the quantum energy patterns they used for their technology, could even detect the faint signals from human ships somewhere beyond the planet's atmosphere. His DNA had not made him into something other than human. It had made him into what humans could become when pushed beyond every limit. And this was just the beginning. The emergency meeting in Zurthak's Crystal Palace lasted for hours. Every high-ranking Valdry scientist and military commander attended, their forms creating a forest of living light in the great chamber. Dr. Park was dragged from her cell to explain what she knew about human genetics. She stood in the center of the room surrounded by beings who could crush her with a thought. But her voice was steady as she spoke. "You've made a fundamental error," she told them. "You assumed that because human genetics look chaotic compared to yours, they must be inferior. But chaos is not weakness, it's unlimited potential." Velnok's crystal form pulsed with agitation. "Impossible. We have studied genetic evolution for 10,000 years. Perfect structure is superior to random mutation. Perfect structure is a dead end," Dr. Park replied. "It cannot change because it's already optimized for current conditions. Human genetics are optimized for change itself." Zurthak listened from his throne, his ancient mind processing implications that disturbed him deeply. The human in the arena, his abilities continue to grow? "Every moment," Thexmore confirmed. "His neural processing has increased by 400%. His cellular regeneration is beyond our measurement capabilities, and his DNA is incorporating elements from every organism he encounters." "Then we release the void spawn," Zurthak decided. "If this human represents a threat to our empire, better to eliminate him now before he grows stronger." The council chamber fell silent. The void spawn was their ultimate weapon, created through centuries of bioengineering and quantum manipulation. It had destroyed entire species, devoured the life force of whole worlds. "My lord," Velnok said carefully, "perhaps we should study him further. If we could understand how human adaptation works, we could incorporate it into our own genetics." "No," Zurthak said with final authority. "The human dies today." Meanwhile, in the holding area beneath the arena, Lee sat quietly while Kim and the other surviving humans watched him with wonder and fear. His appearance had changed since the fight with the Mindrender. His eyes seemed to hold depths that had not been there before, and when he moved, it was with a fluid grace that made him look almost alien himself. "How do you feel?" Kim asked. "Different," Lee replied honestly. "Like I can sense things I never noticed before. The quantum fields the Valdry use for their technology, the emotional patterns of everyone around me, even the gravitational fluctuations. From the planet's core." Dr. Park appeared at the entrance to their holding area, escorted by 2 guards. She looked exhausted but determined. "They're bringing out the void spawn," she told Lee without preamble. "It's their ultimate bioweapon. Nothing has ever survived an encounter with it." "What does it do?" Lee asked. "It exists partially outside normal space-time," Dr. Park explained. "It can phase between dimensions, becoming intangible when you try to attack it, then solid when it strikes you. It feeds on life force directly, draining the quantum energy that holds living matter together." Lee nodded, feeling new neural pathways forming in his brain as it processed this information. "So, it's designed to counter normal biological responses." "Exactly, which means your adaptive genetics might be the only thing that could possibly—" The conversation was cut short as the guards dragged Lee toward the arena entrance. This time, the holding area's viewing screens were activated so the other humans could watch what happened. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Valdry had come from across the planet to witness either the destruction of the adaptive human or the impossible defeat of their ultimate weapon. Zurthak's voice echoed across the Space. Citizens of the Valdry Empire, today you witness the testing of our greatest creation against the most dangerous primitive we have encountered. The Void Spawn has never been defeated. It will not be defeated today. The gates across the arena did not open. Instead, reality seemed to tear itself apart as something stepped through from another dimension entirely. The Void Spawn was a nightmare given form. It looked like a shadow that had learned to move independently, constantly shifting between solid and ethereal states. When it was solid, Lee could see teeth like crystallized darkness and claws that seemed to cut through space itself. When it was ethereal, it became a moving void in the shape of something that might once have been alive. Lee felt his DNA responding before the creature even attacked. New defensive protocols were activating, systems he had never known existed coming online in his cellular structure. The Void Spawn struck without warning, phasing through the arena floor and emerging directly beneath Lee. Its claws passed through his body, but instead of cutting flesh, they began draining his life force directly. Normal humans would have died instantly. Lee felt the creature's feeding begin, but his adaptive genetics immediately started developing countermeasures. His cells began producing quantum barriers. His nervous system started generating defensive fields. His DNA began incorporating elements of the Void Spawn's own dimensional manipulation abilities. The creature recoiled in shock. Nothing had ever resisted its feeding before. Impossible, Zurthak whispered from his throne. Lee stood up, and when he looked at his hands, he could see them flickering in and out of normal spacetime. His DNA had not just defended against the Void Spawn's abilities, it had begun copying them. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Valdry had ever witnessed. Two beings phasing in and out of multiple dimensions, striking at each other across layers of reality, adapting and counter-adapting with each exchange. But the Void Spawn, for all its power, was a created thing. It had been designed for specific purposes and could not change beyond its programming. Lee's genetics had no such limitations. As the fight continued, Lee began to surpass his opponent. His human creativity combined with his new dimensional abilities in ways the Valdry had never imagined possible. In the holding area, Dr. Park watched the readings on her portable scanner with amazement. His genetic structure is becoming something entirely new, she whispered. Not human, not Valdry, not like anything that has ever existed. Captain Yoon's voice suddenly crackled through hidden communication devices the humans had managed to construct. This is Rescue Team Alpha. We're breaking through their orbital defenses. Hold position for extraction. Kim looked at the viewing screen where Lee was literally tearing apart reality to fight the Void Spawn. I don't think he needs extraction anymore. The fight ended when Lee managed to turn the Void Spawn's own dimensional phasing against it, trapping the creature between dimensions where it could neither attack nor defend itself. As the Void Spawn faded into non-existence, Lee stood in the center of the arena, his form flickering between human and something far beyond human understanding. The silence that followed was broken by Zurthak rising from his throne. Enough, the God King declared. I will finish this myself. The arena fell silent as Zurthak rose from his crystal throne. For 1,000 years, the God King had ruled the Valdry Empire from that seat, never once descending to personally deal with a threat. His crystalline form was massive, nearly 15 feet tall, with complex geometric patterns that pulsed with the energy of entire star systems. In 1,000 years of rule, Zurthak's voice boomed across the arena. I have never personally eliminated a lesser being. You should feel honored, human. Lee stood in the center of the arena, his form still flickering between dimensions from his battle with the Void Spawn. His human DNA continued to adapt and change, processing new information and capabilities with each passing second. I didn't ask for this honor, Lee replied, his voice carrying clearly despite the vast space between them. Zurthak began to descend, his throne lowering him slowly toward the arena floor. As he moved, the very air around him began to change. Reality bent and twisted, space-time warping under the pressure of his presence. You represent a threat to the natural order, the God King said. The Valdry achieved genetic perfection through careful evolution over millions of years. We are what all life should aspire to become. But you are chaos given form, Doctor. Park watched from the monitoring station, her instruments going wild as they tried to measure the energy levels being generated. The quantum fluctuations are off the scale, she whispered to Thexmore. He's channeling power directly from the planet's core. Captain Yoon's voice crackled through the hidden communicators again. We're in position above the arena. Lee, if you can hear this, we're ready to extract you. Lee touched the small device. Kim had given him and whispered back, not yet. This has to end here. Zurthak finally reached the arena floor, and his first step cracked the crystalline sand in a perfect circle around him. I have consumed the energy of 47 conquered worlds. I have absorbed the life essence of billions of beings. I am evolution perfected. No, Lee said, feeling his DNA respond to the massive threat before him. Your evolution stopped. The God King attacked without warning. Energy that could crack planets erupted from his crystal form, turning the air itself into plasma as it roared toward Lee. Lee's adaptive genetics kicked into overdrive. His body began incorporating quantum shielding. His cells started generating counter-frequencies. His nervous system developed new pathways to process energy on a cosmic scale. The attack that should have vaporized him was absorbed, processed, and turned into fuel for his continuing evolution. Zurthak's crystal eyes widened in shock. Impossible. That energy could destroy a battlecruiser. Your mistake, Lee said, his form growing brighter as his DNA continued to rewrite itself, is thinking that power equals perfection. But perfection means you can't change. And if you can't change, you can't adapt. The battle that followed reshaped the arena itself. Zurthak unleashed forces that tore holes in spacetime, created gravity wells that crushed matter at the atomic level, and generated temperatures that rivaled the cores of stars. But with each attack, Lee's genetics adapted faster. His human DNA, chaotic and unpredictable, began incorporating elements of Valdry quantum manipulation while maintaining its essential adaptability. In the monitoring station, Velnok watched readings that should have been impossible. He's not just copying our abilities, the High Priest said in amazement. He's improving them. Dr. Park nodded, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. That's what human DNA does. It doesn't just adapt, it innovates. It takes what works and makes it better through creative combination. The fight reached its climax when Zurthak, desperate and enraged, began channeling power directly from the planet's quantum core. The arena cracked and split as energies that held matter together at the subatomic level were unleashed. I will not be defeated by a primitive, the God King roared, his crystal form blazing with the light of a miniature. Lee stood calm in the center of the chaos, his evolved senses processing patterns that Zurthak could not see. The God King's perfection had become a trap. His crystalline structure, optimized for maximum efficiency, followed predictable quantum resonance patterns. You're right about one thing, Lee said, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the dimensional storm surrounding them. Humans are primitive, we're messy, chaotic, unpredictable, we make mistakes. Zurthak prepared his final attack, gathering enough energy to crack the planet itself. Then you admit your inferiority. No, Lee smiled. I'm saying that's our strength. In a moment of pure human intuition, Lee did something no logical mind would attempt. Instead of countering Zurthak's attack or defending against it, he harmonized with it. His chaotic human DNA found the resonance frequency of Zurthak's crystalline structure and began to amplify it. The God King's perfect crystal form, designed for maximum efficiency, became a perfect conductor for its own destruction. The harmonic resonance built rapidly, spreading through Zurthak's quantum-linked crystal matrix faster than he could compensate. His perfection, his evolutionary pinnacle, became his weakness as the resonance shattered his molecular bonds from within. This cannot be, Zurthak gasped as his crystalline body began to crack and fragment. I am perfection incarnate. Perfection is a dead end, Lee replied, echoing Dr. Park's earlier words. Evolution never stops. It never reaches a final form. That's what makes it alive. Zurthok's form shattered like a crystal cathedral in an earthquake, his 1,000-year reign ending in a cascade of light that filled the arena with rainbow fragments. As the God King's energy dispersed, the arena fell, silent once again. Thousands of Valdry stared down at Lee, their perfect crystalline minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. Captain Yoon's ships descended through the arena's broken dome, rescue beams already locked onto the human survivors below. "Lee, we're coming down." Lee looked up at his approaching rescuers, then at the Valdry surrounding them. His enhanced senses could feel their fear, their confusion, their dawning realization that their empire's foundation had just crumbled. "The war doesn't have to continue," he called out, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. Perfection tried to eliminate chaos and failed. But chaos doesn't want to eliminate perfection. We can learn from each other. Dr. Park ran across the arena floor toward him, her instrument still reading impossible genetic changes in his cellular structure. "Lee, what are you now?" Lee smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the human Marine who had been captured just days before. "I'm still human, Dr. Park. Just human with a lot more potential than anyone realized." As the rescue ships landed and began evacuating the human prisoners, Lee turned to address the Valdry leadership directly. His DNA had stabilized into something new, a bridge between species rather than a replacement for either. "Your empire was built on the idea that evolution has an endpoint," he told them. "But evolution is a journey, not a destination. Humans would be happy to share that journey with you, if you're willing to learn." High Priest Velnok, now the highest-ranking Valdry left alive, looked at the shattered remains of his God King, and then at the human who had achieved the impossible. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have much to learn about evolution after all." The rescue operation continued around them, but something more important was beginning. First contact between species based not on conquest or submission, but on mutual recognition that the universe was vast enough for every form of life to find its own path forward. Lee's DNA had not just saved his own life. It had opened a door to a future where perfection and chaos could coexist, each making the other stronger through their differences. The war was over. Evolution would continue.